Halifax recently hosted the Canadian Network for Equity and Racial Justice CNERJ as part of its National Town Hall series, bringing together a panel of local experts and activists to tackle barriers to equity, inclusion, and anti-racism.
However, we do come together. But the challenge is that when we're resourcing human resources.
The event began with a respectful land acknowledgement, honoring the Mi'kmaq people as the traditional custodians of the land.
I welcome the spirits of those who have recently left us, as they are the ones who fought to pass down the knowledge our ancestors created. Through struggle and turmoil, they managed to ensure our language, ceremonies, knowledge, and ways of being will be here for us and keep us strong as a nation. When we feel the warmth of the noon sun, it's their warm embrace telling us we're on the right path. I welcome the spirits of those who guide us. The West is a direction of thought and reflection. I welcome the spirits of those who exist in the here and now. When the sun sets, it's a reminder of the events of the days past. It's a reminder to learn from past experiences so we may prosper in the days, months, and years ahead. It's a reminder to reconcile our shared history, to learn from our mistakes, listen to each other, acknowledge experiences and voices, and work together in a genuine relationship. I welcome the spirits of those who lead us. The North is a direction of renewal. I welcome the spirits of those who have yet to join us. As the cold sets in, our environment takes time to rest and renew itself. Through this harsh time comes strength and unity. We wait in anticipation of that first early morning, that first leaf, the first sound of birds as the sun rises. We wait for the new beginnings to arrive, for new beginnings signify new life, new hope, and new relationships. I welcome the spirits of those that will inspire us. Above us is the direction of protection. I welcome the spirits of our fathers, grandfathers, brothers, uncles, sons, and partners. I welcome the masculine spirit that's also found within the feminine. May you continue to protect us as a nation, as a community, as individuals, as we're all on the same path but in different stages of our journey. I welcome the spirits that protect us. Below us is the direction of love, and this is where we all come from. I welcome the spirits of our mothers, grandmothers, sisters, aunties, daughters, and partners. I welcome the feminine spirit that's also found within the masculine. May you continue to love us, teach us, and guide us as a nation, as a community, as individuals, as we are all grateful for all that you instill in us. And we know that love is the greatest form of protection. I welcome the spirits that love us. Looking within, we find the direction of growth. As we reflect on our lives, we recognize the need to learn from our mistakes. We learn from all the directions. We embrace the knowledge of the spirits that created us. We learn from the spirits that guide us. We have faith in the spirits that lead us. We keep ourselves healthy, both mentally and physically, and anticipate the future spirits that will inspire us. All of this is possible because of the protection and love that surrounds us. I welcome the spirits of continual growth. That being said, I just want to say in Sonogama, all my relations, now that we're all right sacred, y'all can have a seat, and I hope you have some amazing conversations today with your panelists. Walalio, thank y'all very much.
Following this, the event moderator provided an overview of the day's agenda, setting the stage for a rich discussion on systemic barriers and actionable strategies for advancing decoloniality and equity.
Saturday night. So on that, I'd really like to just pose the question, and it's the same one I'm going to be posing to our panelists here today, around what are the biggest challenges that you're facing today? And I will start us off as well before going down the line. And so for us, Nocturne, of course, we exist within a broader colonial and capitalist history, and its urban landscape reflects this and ongoing struggle over power, race, and class. Really thinking about Nocturne taking place in public space. How do we negotiate these spaces and their histories and access? Who has access to art? Who has access to platforms? We also really want, another big challenge is how do we create safer spaces for artists and researchers to really interrogate the political and economic structures that shape cultural production. This is especially true as the festival continues to grow, and that how do we ensure that we can do so with autonomy and with consideration of the power structures that we exist within. So the second part of this question will be, or what we'll do is we'll do the challenges, and then we'll look at what some of our solutions are and maybe some of those silver linings. So I'm going to throw over to Wyatt.
While Community Update was not permitted to cover every aspect of the discussion, we observed how each panelist shared unique insights during their presentations.
Good morning, everyone, and just wanted to acknowledge again Jude's opening comments and helping to open us in a really good way. I've had the privilege of knowing Jude almost since the time I moved here to Jabukduk 22 years ago, and although I'm from another part of Mi'kmaq territory, it very much has always felt like home, being within my own nation's traditional territory, just in the southern part of it as opposed to up in the Gaspé region. So for the last 2.5 years, I've been the Associate Executive Director for the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq, and that's a tribal council. There's 2 in the province, dedicated to providing programs, services, and supports to the 8 mainland Mi'kmaq communities that exist in mainland Nova Scotia. The organization is right on the cusp of celebrating its 40th anniversary, and looking forward to that, we're really, as an organization of almost 200 people strong, trying to live up to the expectation of what a 40-year-old Indigenous organization in a province steeped in history like Nova Scotia is. And I'll actually sort of flag that as one of our first challenges, which is really the expectations of what a Mi'kmaq organization looks like, how it behaves, its knowledge base in sort of the modern context. And there's a bit of myth busting there, I think, to do, and I'll focus on some other challenges as well in a few minutes, but really it's about helping ourselves and others understand that there actually is a difference between indigenization and decolonization. Those, for many, many people, kind of mean the same thing, and that if you do one, it automatically leads to the other, or vice versa. Not necessarily the case. We're an organization who focuses on equity, but bringing that Mi'kmaq lens. So we're Mi'kmaq-led in terms of our board of directors are the chiefs of the 8 First Nations that we represent. And that is a critical foundation for our organization, that despite focusing on the challenges of employment equity and ensuring that we are an equitable employer, we have to figure out innovative ways to ensure that Mi'kmaq teachings such as Nedugulimk, which is sort of this Mi'kmaq force of acknowledging that we're all interconnected and that we're all equal in some way, or the concept of Eduwamtamunk, which is this idea of bringing Mi'kmaq views and Western views together to see the world in a much more enriched way. How do we do that while maintaining the integrity of being a Mi'kmaq organization? The challenges that come with being we believe to be a responsible employer, focusing on equity, and affirming the needs of the community through who we employ and who we bring in the community, can often come with its own set of challenges. So folks talk about the benefits and values of a diverse workplace, which I certainly will be the first to support and would never argue with, but people don't talk about the challenges that come with diversity and equity. So getting the person that you're targeting to make the change within is one. Keeping them employed and feeling like they belong in the organization is another challenge entirely. And so how do we, as an organization of approximately 50 to 55% of our employees identify as Mi'kmaq or of Indigenous ancestry, the other 45% typically identify as being of European ancestry. And there are expectations of what that means to work for an Indigenous organization as a non-Indigenous person, the privilege that you might think you are free to exercise versus not, and understanding that this work that we do about growing and understanding each other, it really is rooted in the history of the organization. But in a 21st century context, it's hard to help people feel what that looks like rather than hearing that it's something that's important to the organization. As a blended organization who's growing quite quickly, and we've moved to a beautiful new space up in Millbrook First Nation, those challenges of change and change at a quick pace have come to present opportunities where lateral violence exists in our organization. And so typically, you know, as organizations who struggle to access funding and supports in competition with others, there can be examples of lateral violence where employees are turning on each other, and they're using things like gossip and hearsay to take each other down, despite being an organization who, you know, talks about walking the talk of honoring the 7 sacred teachings. And that's my last sort of challenge that I'll highlight is really this work that we need to do in honoring the 7 sacred teachings, which are generally quite universal to Indigenous people across Turtle Island. Honesty, respect, wisdom, love, humility, courage, and truth. And if you compare those 7 virtues or values in other organizations that you work with, and I worked with the federal and provincial government for just over 20 years prior to coming to the CMM, I would have a very challenging scorecard to highlight what each of those 7 values look like in the departments and the ministers that I had supported in that. So I'll leave it at that, and hopefully it gives you a sense of the diversity of challenges and really this idea that just because it's an Indigenous organization doesn't mean it has its Indigenous act pulled together. So Walalia.
Hi everyone, Orlando Tovar, he, him pronouns. I am very excited to be here and thank you for inviting us. I'll start by introducing myself. I am a gay man who came to Canada initially in 2022. I originally came from Mexico. I came here as an international student, and I am currently one of the co-executive directors of the Rainbow Refugee Association of Nova Scotia. Or RANS as we call it to shorten it. RANS is a non-profit and registered charity that advocates and works on facilitating private sponsorship of LGBTQI refugees who have fled their countries of origin because of persecution and violence due to their diverse sexual orientation, gender identity or expression or sex characteristics, and that are now living in second countries of asylum. Our work, it's mostly focused on facilitating this private sponsorship. We put together applications through the government for refugees to come here and resettle in Nova Scotia. And once they arrive, we provide them with financial support during their first year in Canada, and we also provide them with settlement services to accompany them during their resettlement process. And this looks like we work with them in providing housing assistance, facilitating language training, employment resources, and this is all to, again, accompany them and make their transition smooth into their life in Nova Scotia. But we also engage in some other type of services as training and capacity building, so we focus on educating our volunteer networks, on community partners, on the nuances of working with LGBTQI refugees and US LGBTQIA newcomers. And one big aspect of what we do is also we create safe spaces for people to build community and start thriving and just like recuperate control of their lives. The other big part of our work is advocacy. So we focus on raise awareness of the particular challenges faced by LGBTQI refugees and US LGBTQIA newcomers, to influence policy changes and enhance the rights and well-being of the population we serve. So if we talk about key challenges, if you look at us, like we queer and trans people who are also racialized and who are newcomers, if you look at the circle of power, we're pretty much very far from it. And the the biggest challenge come from what is very obvious, like systemic racism and colonialism. The immigration system itself, it's a colonial instrument which is rooted in these colonial legacies and prioritize some groups over the others. Like even within the immigrant realm, a person who comes here as an economic immigrant will will have a very different experience than somebody who's here as a temporary worker, a model who has been equiparated to a contemporary form of slavery, or somebody who comes here as an international student, somebody who comes here as a refugee or as an asylum seeker, which is also another big difference when it comes to newcomers. So this system very frequently fails to acknowledge the compounded discrimination faced by racialized LGBTQI refugees and US LGBTQIA newcomers. And on top of that, it's this public narrative that we immigrants are the root cause of way more complex problems as housing, healthcare. And this narrative only fuels xenophobia and reinforces this colonial power structure. So another system that is very rooted in this idea is, let's say, education and employment. The Canadian education system, particularly the post-secondary education, is based on this idea that only the Western-centric forms of education are valid or are superior, and completely disregard some other forms of knowledge, particularly from indigenous ways of knowledge, immigrants' ways of knowledge, refugees' ways of knowledge and experience. So it leaves people who come here, when it comes to education and employment, with either two options. And one is going through a credential recognition process, which again, it's also a colonial way of saying like, hey, we're going to examine your education and see if it's valid enough, which is a very, not only long process, but also expensive. Or the other one is starting over, as myself. Like we come here paying ridiculously expensive international fees to get education. And then once we finish, in many, many cases, a lot of immigrants end up in these quote-unquote immigrant jobs, mostly because of racism. A lot of people cannot even access to an interview because of how their name is written or pronounced, or the language they speak, or if they have an accent or not. And for those who are like lucky enough to get that first interview, are in most cases competing for entry-level jobs, even when they're like clearly overqualified, overeducated. And then they face another challenge, which is a lot of people in the private and public sector saying like, hey, why, if you have all this education and experience, why are you applying for this entry-level work? Well, that's the only one that I can access. So if we look at it, it's like we end up without alternatives. So this system, again, perpetuates devaluation and only creates more barriers to a group which in our case is already facing many other challenges due to their intersectionality. That leads me to my other point. It's like the intersectional discrimination that we face, it's even within the settlement and advocacy sector. Like in Atlantic Canada, there is no settlement agency who specifically works and advocates for 2S LGBTQIA newcomers. You have settlement agencies working with newcomers, and you have 2S LGBTQIA agencies working for that population, but rarely they intersect. So with this, again, public narrative of immigrants are the problem, this cutting in levels of immigration, for those few grassroots organizations as RANs, we struggle in that part as well. Like we hardly get access to funding. It seems like it was not really an area where resources should be, but they are. So I guess there are many, many, many challenges. I can think of those, but mostly I would summarize it as that. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Colleen Bell. I am the coordinator for the Welcoming Communities at the Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia. You would know it as ISANS. I do want to recognize the manager here, Denise Scott. She is the manager of the Community Integration Services, my manager as well. So Colleen Bell, just to share a little bit about myself, I am originally from Barbados in the Caribbean, land of the sea, the sun, the flying fish. And myself, my husband, our two boys, we moved here over 8 years ago. Do have history with Canada from the time of being a teenager. And I am very mindful and respectful of the Indigenous peoples who were here before, taking care of the land. Other communities, such as the African Nova Scotian communities, also helping to take care of the land. I'm very mindful and respectful of that. The role that I'm in as the Welcoming Communities Coordinator at ISANS, much of my work is around training in intercultural competence. In other words, helping different people from different backgrounds, whether it be national backgrounds, whether it be ethnic backgrounds, whatever the different backgrounds are, understanding how we can communicate effectively with each other, starting with respect and moving towards how we can work together. My work is also around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so a little bit about, and so I would have had background in a number of other areas, but this is an area that I'm truly passionate about because I'm a people's person, and this ultimately, this work is about helping people to relate to each other, see each other, recognize the value of each other, and that just as I believe that I'm important, every single one of you here are important, irregardless of whatever your background is. So I'm really thankful that ISANS, I joined ISANS in 2019, working in the intercultural competence, the intercultural workplace program, taking this type of training into business houses, to employers. And then in 2020, I moved into the Welcoming Communities, taking this type of work all over Nova Scotia. And ISANS, our main work as a non-profit organization is to help immigrants coming from other countries to be able to build a strong foundation here, to be able to come and to live, enjoy life here. A lot of that work is funded, and it is around helping immigrants as they come to find employment, to be able to have their families integrated into society, children into school, finding housing, etc., and whether it be opening up their business or transferring it from another country. But one of the challenges that we've recognized as an organization up front is that we are not the original people from here. The Mi'kmaq people were here before. And how can we do this work of helping people to come and to build a life here without being respectful of those who were here before, and ensuring and making sure that those people who are coming, that they're truly understanding this and having respect for that. So how could we do our work while still being mindful of who were here before? That is one of the challenges, and I will look to how we were, seek to deal with that, to bring solution to that challenge. Myself in this role in 2020, one of the things that I immediately recognized when I entered into this role was that there was a challenge where there were immigrants who were coming into traditional communities, and they were not necessarily gelling because of not understanding the histories of people who existed, and then in some instances with immigration increasing, communities not understanding the individuals who were coming. And so a back and forth of me not understanding your perspective or understanding who you are or respecting where you've come from and all that you've had to face with. And on the flip end, people who are living here not necessarily understanding some of the challenges that immigrants are coming with, that my colleague also mentioned and highlighted a number of them. So I had front spot as an immigrant myself to be able to understand some of these challenges, and therefore an impetus and a determination to see how I could be able to assist with this. And I consider ISANS with an intention about being intentional for inclusion, created a space that allowed me to be able to do that work, to address some of those differences in communities. Another challenge that I want to highlight is even around people, immigrants coming and settling. One of the best ways for any of us here to be able to try to find a new home or integrate into a society is to find enjoyment, recreation, fun, relaxation, something that brings us peace. But we recognize that from a lot of the feedback from immigrants, there were spaces where they did not feel that welcoming atmosphere. Now, you will hear this echoed with people who would have lived in this community for several years as well. And again, it speaks to the colonial background that is influencing and creating a lot of barriers and, what's the word I'm looking for? And challenges for people. Discrimination, that's the word I was looking for. And so even in those spaces, that is a challenge, that where people would come and the thing that ordinarily would have brought them relaxation, we found that in some of the spaces, there was not that welcome. Even something as simple as, how do I register? And I remember myself coming here, first of all, thinking, okay, my boys, we're gonna get them in summer programs. And just before summer, looking for the programs and hearing, oh, football closed, not football, baseball closed since February. You know, simple things that might seem simple, but that can really disrupt a person's peace and truly being able to settle successfully. Another area is around what my colleague also mentioned, around educated professionals coming. And you're hearing, come to Canada, come to Canada. Canada wants highly skilled individuals. Canada wants people to come. Canada wants to build a population. And you come, and then a lot of the challenges that our newcomers are having is that highly skilled people are coming. There are 47 regulatory professions here in Nova Scotia, and in many instances, people are not able to transfer their years of experience, 20 years of experience in an area, all of the qualifications, not able to enter into the spaces where they can utilize their expertise, but having to attain what we would call survival jobs, frontline jobs, just barely making it. And you can imagine how that can impact a person's whole psyche and think about the whole family. Another thing that we've been recognizing is many of the international talent that is coming, going into employers, going into workspaces, because of the homogeneous groups that have existed and that are there. Again, the discrimination, and in many instances, right out racism, where they are professionals or anyone else, any person coming through any stream as an immigrant, will be experiencing racism in some instances, and having to leave the province because maybe the children are being bullied at school or experiencing racism and discrimination within the workspace. And then one of the things that I also want to highlight is the healthy immigrant effect. It's a phenomenon that you can research, but the idea that when you come, many times that level of health is of a higher level because you're taking medicals, etc. You're coming higher level of health than the average person born in Canada, and then over the first 3 to 5 years, that health dips right below. Think of it. What causes it? Stress. Stress is a killer. And there are so many barriers that are confronting immigrants. There are so many barriers that are standing in their way that is resulting in the blood pressure rising, heart problems, strokes, all of that, and that health dips. And it is only after the first 5 to 7 years that it just levels off. It doesn't go back to that higher level, it levels off. These are some of the challenges that we have been working at ISENS to bring solutions to. Thank you.
Hello everyone. First I would like to thank you to Jude for the prayers, and I would like to introduce myself. So I'm an artist and professionally work as a data analyst. I love collaborating with and working with other artists to different communities as well as individually. And for the past 3 years, I have been coordinating Noisemaker program with the Nocturne team. I would like to share more about this program itself. So this is an initiative between Nocturne, Wonderneath Art Center and iSense, and it welcomes newcomer and immigrant artists in Halifax. This project is funded by the province of Nova Scotia, and it focuses on building belonging, strengthening the connection, and creating art in the public spaces with newcomer and immigrant artists. Each year we organize a new way to connect cross-culturally and use art as a catalyst for connection here in Mi'kma'ki. So this program started in 2019 as the outdoor art workshop program for immigrant and newcomer artists. Then COVID happened, everything changed, and 2020 and 2021, they started creating free take-home art kits at Wonderneath Art Center and dispatching from there. And I remember watching those created projects on social media because that was one of the connecting points for these people who are taking kids their home and sharing there. And it was really a nice connection to the community. Then 2022, the program evolved in new direction, and we started having cohort-based structure to support the group of newcomer artists. Through application process, we select 7 participants, and these participants go through 14 weeks of intensive program. First 6 weeks are based on professional development sessions. We plan those sessions according to their need and necessities. And next 8 sessions, they are more studio-based practice. At Wonderneath Art Center, they get studio space for 24-hour access, and they create individual projects or one collaborative project. And at that time, art facilitator come into the picture, and that person guides all these participants. And the created project get displayed at the Nocturne night. So that's how it starts and evolves. And every session we provide food, and that becomes really favorite part of participant because that mingling around, connecting with each other, that's create really collaborative connection between each other. And the participants who complete this 14 weeks of program, they get $1,000 honorarium. So it helps them to be there, spend their time there. About the challenges, so I feel to start with this specific program has a broad and inclusive approach. As it focuses on immigrants and newcomers, it embraces diverse religions, races, cultures, and languages. It fosters understanding and multiculturalism in the community. Diversity is central to its purpose. And through the lens of this program, we experience a couple of challenges which I like to share. So language barrier is one of the challenges we come across. Hurdles such as limited networks, unfamiliarity with local artistic norms, and a lack of mentorship can be really challenging. And when I moved here in 2018, I experienced the similar challenges. Then recognition about the indigenous people history, their culture, and the art practices. Also, we would like to foster more awareness of these available opportunities. Transport also can be one of the obstacles depending on the situation. We are looking forward to ongoing monthly support for all these newcomer artists as well as whoever is new in this art community, newcomers and immigrant artists. We would like to support throughout the year support. So those are the challenges we are facing at present. And besides that, given the politics situation, and when I look around and see a bigger picture, at society level, I resonate a quote by Edward Wilson, a biologist, naturalist, and ecologist, who profoundly understood the complexities of human progress. He said, "We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And it is terrifically dangerous, and it is now approaching a point of crisis overall." And I feel acknowledging these tensions will give us the opportunity to act with intention and more awareness. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the panelists who have gone before me, and one I can see who's still to come. So my name is Sylvia. My pronouns are she, her. And I still am processing and feeling the weight of Jude's introduction for us in his message. I thought when I was listening and then made a note to myself, you know, we talk about when we do land acknowledgements that we want them to go beyond being just performative in terms of words. And I feel like that was such a strong example about how we do them better in terms of the acknowledgement about what's happening, what has happened, what is happening, what is in our moment. And so it's made me think in terms of people's acknowledgement that I want to speak to a bit. And I also want to speak to a bit as I go in and describe the organization that I work with and talk about the challenges in this portion of the panel. I want to acknowledge that we in the African Nova Scotian Black community, hold community in our heart and hold it in all we do in terms of individuals in organizations and the structure of organizations. And so what I wanted to acknowledge is that we have felt loss and tragedy very recently, and yet we know we still need to go into our workspaces and do what we are committed to do in terms of support and collaborative work with our communities. And I am fortunate to be in a space where there is around me in terms of my board and in terms of my peers in the operations part of Dalmore Buddy Day Learning Institute, this opportunity to look around and see myself reflected and have this opportunity to think there's a part of this that is happening that acknowledges that I'm holding tragedy that I don't have to explain to anyone. People get it and they know it. And so I would encourage us when we're in spaces where there's integrated employment, I guess, or whatever the right word is for people to hear it well, that we're mindful of that, right? We're mindful of that. I'm also mindful in terms of gender, of I think what we're holding now, again, Black female, in terms of a gender identification piece around what is happening in inter-partner violence that we've heard in the media a lot. So I just thinking about, because what has made us or supported us in terms of survival to this time is the essence of community that is relational and that which would have emotion in it. So I just wanted to kind of hold up those pieces. So in terms of the recognition of the Mi'kmaq and this Mi'kmaqi and this component of Turtle Island, which goes beyond the provincial boundaries that we have had, I want to acknowledge that the African Nova Scotian community who small I, lowercase I, Indigenous, identify as being here 400 years plus, that we are able to be here and have our generations come because of the support of the Mi'kmaq community. And so that's very important to acknowledge. I also want us to be able to acknowledge that in those migrations where land was promised. It was land that was not owned by the colonizers who actually didn't give it to us in the way that it was said, but that was committed, that it really wasn't someone's right to give away. And so we struggle, I think, with that, certainly in our communities, and I think we all should struggle with the wealth that we have on Mi'kmaq communities' essence, right, because of that. So the acknowledgement that we are a distinct people, that people of African descent, African Nova Scotians, a starting birthplace for the presence of us across the country, that is a people's acknowledgement that is not decoupled from the acknowledgement of First Nations and land acknowledgement spaces. So the Dalmore Buddy Day Learning Institute, 2022, we acknowledged ourselves in this current structure that we have, an organization with a fabulous staff team and board members. In 2022, yes, we were 10 years young in that. And so our origins are well-rooted and I hopefully model today in community. It was community in terms of, tap my phone so I can see the time. It was community in terms of the Black Learners Advisory Committee, which developed produced a report in 1994 that is still in progress to be fully implemented. Hold that space and think about what that means in terms of a challenge to move forward and to do things. The essence of that community organization that did research, and Dalmore Buddy Day Learning Institute is a research and education institute that is, I think, iterative, reflexive, and progressive in the way that we research, we turn that into something that has a knowledge translation that can be held by community and academics and public school system, and we continue that kind of. It's one time where a circle kind of way of being kind of works, right? Because it's as I said, it's iterative in the way that one informs the other, right? So we do the research, participatory action research. Again, you'll keep hearing us. And I want to pause and acknowledge, I wrote down to myself, what is common I'm hearing across in these conversations was the importance of centering voice and having people be able to speak for themselves, their own identity and their own reality. And that certainly is an important piece for what we want to happen, try to happen out of Dalmore Buddy Day Learning Institute, DBDLI. See how that acronym rolls off in terms of that. So this research piece is really important. So I identified a challenge in terms of we've been working to structures, and the we is a broader we than just Dalmore Buddy Day Learning Institute, but our component, which is unique, I would argue across the country to have Afrocentric research. Certainly here it maintains its uniqueness because of the longevity of the community that exists here. We also recognize and work and grow in terms of waves of immigration that relate and intersect with our community. So I feel like this is a moment to say as well. So when we talk about African Nova Scotian communities, advancing that work, in the same way I talk about being a Black woman, unashamedly so, I talk about being African Nova Scotian and the uniqueness and focus of that work. It's a disservice to what we do when some people translate that into being competitive. We are not competitive. We are all sisters and brothers in terms of identities, across, right? And so to have a focus does not mean to be against something. So I want to acknowledge that as well, because that becomes a challenge, sometimes in soliciting funds to do work, to do projects. Sometimes it becomes a challenge in terms of how we are able to well advocate for change in terms of policy work. One aspect of my background is policy. I feel like get the policy right, it is sustained, and we are really going to see a change in terms of the work. And so this challenge as well is that we bring into our way of being and information from the perspective of being an oral society and from the perspective of storytelling. People need to understand that we tell our stories selectively. It's not entertainment. It is about informing and being creative. And I love what is happening here around privileging a space, highlighting a space around art, right? And the different ways that that shows up in terms of representation, because I think it broadens the reach in terms of who can be engaged in different ways that we can access and learn. So I mentioned the challenge in terms of the implementation of the 46 recommendations of the Black Learners Advisory Committee, which last year was 30 years old. How long does it take, right, to kind of do it? And still being able to respond as things are changing and things are growing. And acknowledging that there are a number of partner organizations that collaborate together to kind of do things. And as I mentioned, we can have focus. So we have a focus in terms of, we have someone here from the Justice Institute. And so I know that there's kind of focus pieces. However, we do come together.
Community Update remains dedicated to sharing the essence of community gatherings like this one, amplifying the voices and themes that aim to inspire tangible change in our local community. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more updates.